Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek Deep Thoughts Thin Coats with me, Phil, the Glacial Geek. Today, I am going to be talking about my first impressions with 8th edition. I've gotten a couple games under my belt. I've been looking at the rules and looking at some of the indexes, and I feel like I want to give my first impressions. This isn't like a final decision on 8th edition. Just kind of going over how my experience has been so far with everything that I've been having with playing the game. And during that time, I'm going to be building my guys here. These are the acolytes and the metamorphs that I've been building up. The ones I was trying to build last time and failed miserably at doing. Yeah, the kits are super. You have a lot of options when you're building them, and it takes a lot of concentration kind of figuring out how to put them together and what to do with them. So I've put them together and I've primed them, and I left them on here because I wanted to show you my process that I do for using rattle can primer. What I do is I put them together. Anything that's going to be blocking the front here to block like on this guy here. If this was his weapon, which I've got the rock saw there. If that was on him, it would be blocking the front here, make it very difficult to paint. In doing so, I kind of do I build it in parts here. So I put the arms and the saw together, and I've got the body here together, everything except just putting those two together, and I paint them separately. So what I do is I actually super glue on here. You can see I super glue the arm onto a piece of sprue, an L-shaped piece of sprue that I just clip out, so it can hold it, and then I can hold it then when I'm painting. And it keeps it separate and allows me to paint, get into the chest here and get behind here. It just makes things a lot easier when it comes to painting when I'm doing it. But to prime it, what I do is I assemble them all together, put them on their bases, and then I just tape the bases onto a paint stir stick. So you can just get them for free at your local hardware store. So at a, you know, whatever it is, whatever your local one is as paint supplies, you can just get a free stir sticks there. Just grab a couple if you're going to do it. And what I do is I just tape them in a row, and then I've got them on the stick, which makes it real easy to hold. And what I do is I kind of have this rubber glove that I put on, so that the reason I put on the rubber glove and I don't just hold it is because this way, when I'm spraying it, I can spray it like this, so that I'm spraying along this way. But if I want to shoot this side, I just turn it around like this, and I don't have to worry about getting my hands completely covered in primer, which takes a while to get off, and then people on the internet make fun of you for painting your fingernails, even though it's just primer that you've got on there. So that's the process that I do for rattle can primer. It's super easy, makes it super simple, and then all you have to do is you just you know, pull the tape off, and you're good to go. So yeah, so that's what I'm going to be working on. I'm going to be putting down some probably just some base colors on the skin. I think I'm going to be working on these guys, so hopefully it won't take quite as much brain power and won't make me pause as much when I'm doing over this. So yes, so on to the topic that we were talking about today, which is my first impressions with 8th edition. I freaking love it. It was very fun, and it's I could really get into it a lot faster than when I first got into 7th edition, because you know, as much as I was looking up rules and I was looking up you know, things on the index pages, I wasn't as caught up in trying to figure out what rules I needed to know, because all the rules you need to know for the units are in their war scrolls or their data slates, or however they want to call them, which makes it a whole lot easier to figure out what you need to know to properly use your unit, you know. And the first games, obviously, we spent a lot of time looking up what things had to do, looking up the rules, but just the basic ones that we had to do to start out a game, because we haven't played 8th edition before. And to be honest, I spent a lot less time looking up things once I started to get an idea of what my units could do than I used to be looking up in 7th edition, because I knew where everything was, and once I looked up on the data slate, boom, it was right there what I needed to know. The game also runs a lot smoother without having to worry about things like scattering, without having to worry about things like where the templates lie, without having to worry about which rules supersede which rules are, you know, a lot of the things like figuring out which rules pertain to what based upon the formation, based upon the detachments, based upon their army special rules. None of that came into effect when we were dealing with things, and it made the games run a lot smoother. And in so doing, just made it a lot more fun. I didn't have any arguments about things. We just kind of went along, even with the new rules that they have for cover, which, you know, if you're trying to figure out, it's like, oh, is that, you know, 50% covered? Is that 25% covered? I don't know. If the unit's not on cover, then it doesn't get any cover bonus, you know? And you don't have to worry about anything. It's just a +1 cover. So it's like, oh, is this ruins? Is this not ruins? I'm not sure. It doesn't matter, because at this point, if you get cover, you get +1, unless you have some special rules or anything like that. So it makes it a lot simpler. It makes it a lot, it made it flow a lot easier, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that a lot. I think it made the game go faster. It made the game go smoother, and in so doing, it made it a lot of fun. In my experience so far, I really feel like they've done a lot to balance out the armies that have fought. I've fought a game so far. I've only really played my Dark Angels so far, so I'm excited to try to get some of these guys on the board and see how they perform in 8th edition. But essentially what we did as I played a friendly game against Chaos, although I think he was running them as Astra Militarum, because he runs like a Renegade list, which is going to be coming out with the Forge World stuff. But I don't think it had quite come out yet, so so he'll be doing that. But we played the game, and it was a lot of fun. We both, that was the first game either of us had played 8th edition, and we kind of read over the rules, and we had them as like a reference there when we were playing with them, and it made it super simple to play with. It made it a lot easier to play, and we were able to just kind of get into the game and get into the crux of how things were. And it went smooth. It went fun. We weren't arguing. We weren't having discussions about, you know, things. It's all kind of like up front there for you, which is pretty great. So yeah, my first impressions are great. I had a lot of fun. I think the rules that they've changed have really, so far that I've experienced, have been pretty good. They've been a lot of fun to play with. We had, you know, with Deep Strike now, I could bring in I brought in my Death Wing, which I think you probably saw if you watched my battle report. And I was able to Deep Strike them, just place them more than 9 inches away from the enemy, which is a lot of fun. Just being able to place them, not worry about, oh man, this huge unit now that's a big part of my force suddenly scattered so that a part of a base is now just over the table edge. Now you got to roll on the mishap table, and it's like, oh look, they're dead. I rolled a 1. So that huge unit that was a part of my army is now dead, and I've got a massively uphill battle here, and basically fighting a game at a huge point sink, you know, at a major deficit, and I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fun. No one really wants to do that, you know. I guess maybe if you're in a competitive situation, it might be beneficial to you if your opponent suddenly Deep Strike mishaps their big scary unit that's coming after you. But just in general play and looking for a fun game, it's boring. You know, it's boring. I had a game once where my opponent deep struck Lysander with 10 Terminators with Thunderhammer Storm Shields. It was a big, huge part of his force, and he rolled a 12 for scatter onto a situation where he couldn't place them all because there was 10 guys there, and rolled mishap, rolled a 1, they were dead. And suddenly I had, you know, Slay the Warlord, and he lost a huge chunk of his army, and yeah, sure enough, I ended up winning that game because he just was already at a disadvantage for the entire game because of that 1 scatter. And that's not fun, you know. It wasn't fun. It was in a tournament, so I was happy to get the win, but it wasn't fun. And I think a lot of the rules that they've changed on this are not necessarily aimed at what's the most competitive way to make an army, or the most competitive way to make a game. I think it was designed for how can we make this more fun. And in the process, I think it's going to make competitive play more fun because people are, like I said, not going to have those situations that just, you know, where you show up and you're like, well, this stinks. There's nothing I can do about this, you know, because there was a lot of times when you'd run up to someone had a 5-man, you know, if they have a 5-man knight list and suddenly you've got a list that doesn't have any strength 7, and there's nothing you can do against them, and you're just sitting back going, well, this game is just going to be me sitting back and waiting till he completely just kills me, which is boring. No one really wants to play that kind of game. It's not fun for the person that's got the knights. It's not fun for anybody at that point because it's not a game at that point. It's just well, because your guys can't do anything to my guys, you know, GG. Everybody just go home, you know, and that's boring. You know, at this point now, everything can wound everything. Not everything has an easy time wounding everything. You know what I mean? But at the same time, everything can wound everything, and everything can shoot everything. Everything can assault everything. It just means that your models are getting in there and you're rolling dice and having fun with the game, which I think is the whole point of Warhammer. And so far, my experience with it has been exactly that. That we can get to the fun parts of the game, the tactical decisions, the maneuvering, the shooting and the assaulting, and all that fun stuff that we play the game because of. You get to do that stuff, and you get to it without having to sit there and just have like a, you know, I had a couple of games where it wasn't fun because you're sitting back and it's like, well, this is completely uneven. There's nothing we can do about this. You know, nowadays it feels like, you know, not everything's the same. You know, a Riptide is still going to be stronger than, you know, a regular tactical marine, but at the same time, I feel like I'm left in a situation now where I have the ability to compete against them regardless of what units I take. It's just going to be harder for me, which is the point. It's always been that way. You know what I mean? And Guardsman was the same way, where it's like, you know, it's if you've got a ton of guard models, and they're going in there and they're trying to fight against the big nasties. The whole point was that their heart and drive to just stay there in the face of overwhelming odds against them was what defined the guard. And now you get to see that on the battlefield because they can actually do stuff against these things. You know, they're, you know, the David and Goliath situation where as long as they heave those las gun shots and they happen to hit the right places and you luck out, you can take them down. It's going to take a lot, and you're going to have to keep firing at them and hoping that you can just outlast them. But that's the whole point of the Guard. That's how they play, and that's how it's meant to be played. That's how they talk about it in, you know, in the novels, like the Gaunt's Ghost books and stuff like that. You know, you see these guys going up against the odds and coming back victorious, but, you know, barely. You know what I mean? It's not an easy go for anybody at that point, which is, you know, that's the point of the Guard, and now you can see that on the tabletop, which I think is fantastic. You know, so far I haven't run into a single unit that's been useless to me. I haven't run into a single unit that wasn't able to at least provide some kind of impact on the battlefield. The one I played against, my friend with the quasi-chaos cultist, he was running him as Astra Militarum. He had a bunch of regular troopers, and he ended up penning in one of my predators that I was fighting against, and he just kept him locked in there because he made it so that I couldn't back out because, you know, vehicles now can't go on to another level of ruins, you can't go through walls, so he kind of just like penned me against a wall, and there was nothing I could do, and I was stuck there, which is awesome. You know what I mean? I could keep trying to wail at him, and he was going to take. It took him a long time to start taking down the hull points on it, but at the same time he had a Quagmire there, and that gun wasn't, those las guns on it weren't shooting. So I think that you're going to see a lot more diversity of tactics. I think you're going to see a lot of situations where people kind of have to think on the fly as they're fighting up against it. So like my friend, like when he saw that I was running the Predators, he was like, okay, well, you know, what can I do with these guys? I'm not going to have as much luck just shooting them with these, but what I can do is I can lock them into combat with this squad of troops because they're not as good in close combat. And in so doing, I can make it so that they are then locked in there, and the rest of my army can go around shooting the rest of the rest of his army could go around taking on the rest of my army, which made it really interesting. He was also using artillery and stuff, so you know, it was great. It was a lot of fun. Then I played a game against Tau, and the Tau are effective. You know, I had a lot of people that were commenting and say, it's like, well, Tau is now, you know, useless. It's like, they are not useless. They are very good at what they do, which is shoot things off the board. And they were a lot of, you know, my friend played them, had a lot of fun playing them. He brought a list that he wanted to see if a 7th edition list could still be brought in 8th edition, and sure enough, it could. It looked very similar to kind of lists that he brings to tournaments and stuff. And yeah, they performed very, very well, you know, and I think that, you know, I think that we got a couple rules slightly wrong, which may have had an impact on the game, but at the same time, I mean, it's the first games of 8th edition, of course that's going to happen. I was getting rules wrong in 7th edition, even towards the end, people were pointing them out. So, you know, with that to be expected, I think looking back on it now, I think that, you know, if a couple roles had gone differently, if a couple situations had gone differently, the army that I brought could have held its own against his army. So I think we've got a really good sense of balance, and it comes down to how you maneuver your army, how the dice play out, and that's kind of the best you could ask for from this kind of game, is that it comes down to how you play as a general and how your dice treat you on that day. You know, that's exactly what the game is supposed to do. You know, and that's exactly what I think Warhammer is supposed to be, is that the best general is going to usually win as long as their dice cooperate with them. You know, and that's not always the case. They don't always cooperate. But at the same time, I think it's you're left with a situation that's a lot of fun, and it's just yeah, it's a good time. Going into some of the changes that they've made that I think are beneficial. I like the changes to cover, like I've talked about. I think just it makes it a lot simpler. You get to see the way things are. There's a lot less arguing over, oh, is he obscured? Is he not obscured? You know, am I 25% obscured? There's no more really obscured. Vehicles and I guess monsters, creatures still need to be obscured, but they need to be in cover still. So, you know, you got a little bit of that discussion, but far less than you used to. There's no more intervening models, none of that stuff. It's all just, you know, can you see them? Yes, then you can shoot at them. Are they in cover? Yes, then they get +1 to their save. Which is nice, you know, so it lets you, if you've got Terminators in cover there, that +1 to the save helps you ignore the first bit of AP. So that first -1 Ren that you've got going on there, you don't have to worry about it because, you know, you've got it covered now at this point. I think it's interesting, I think it's fun, and I think it's a lot simpler. And I think but not simpler in a sense of simplistic, but just simpler as in there's less minutia involved with it. It's far more getting to just understand the way it is, and it's a stated rule, and you get to play it. So it's, you know, it's become like a chess thing where each of the units have their own special rules. You use them on the game board, and you don't have a lot of more complex things that just, you know, make things more complicated. And at this point, it becomes the person who can synergize their army the best, who has some luck with the rolls, and who can better marshal and be a better general is going to win. And that's my experience so far. And it's been a lot of fun because of that. But yeah, so the cover, I think, just, you know, it simplifies it a little bit, makes it a little less esoteric, a little less you know, complicated, and makes the game run a lot smoother, because you just look at it and you're like, nope, they're not in cover, you don't get cover, you know. And I messed that up a little bit because, you know, I still got 7th edition locked in my brain when it comes to playing the game, but it'll come, and I think it's going to make the game run a lot smoother. Another thing is no more scatter dice, and that was amazing. I loved the fact that there's no more scatter dice, because now you just get to, you just shoot at a unit, or you just deep strike a unit and you just place them, or you just shoot at them. So you no longer have to roll the scatter dice, you no longer have to figure out where everything's scattered off to, you don't have to figure out if everything landed on the board or where it goes, you just have to place them on the board, you just have to choose the unit and roll your dice to see if you hit them, and there's a lot less arguing, a lot less discussion that goes on. You know, and I know that a lot of people are like, all you had to do if there was a disagreement is you just roll off a dice, but you roll off a dice and one person's not going to be happy. And that's, you know, that's just the way it is. And one person's going to be sitting there, regardless of how it goes, is that they disagreed with how the decision ended up going their way, you know, going that way. And as much as you're not going to hold a grudge about it, it's still not cool. You know what I mean? Now, there's no discussion. You could just place them anywhere that's outside of 9 inches from, that's further than 9 inches from any enemy models on the board. You just place them, and they're placed. You know, no more discussion. It's like, oh, well, I think this guy's scattered further over here. I think he landed in terrain. I think he needs to take a dangerous terrain test. No, I just place my guys, and we're good to go. We keep moving on. Also, I think it's fun that you no longer have you no longer have to roll for reserves. That you can just bring them in whenever you want. It makes it a lot more tactical, so you can hold things further in reserve if you want to wait till later to bring them in as a you know, once everything's kind of getting locked in. Or you could sit there and you can decide to bring them in first turn so that you have them on the board being able to do stuff for you right off the bat. I think that having that kind of versatility really makes for an interesting dynamic. And I think it makes things a lot easier, because there was nothing more frustrating than sitting there rolling 2s for reserves for your guys through 4 turns until they finally come in turn 4 and there's nothing for them to do on the board because they land, and then by the time they can do anything, the game's over. Now you don't have to worry about that. It's just basically a different form of deployment that I think makes the game a lot smoother, makes the game a lot more fun and dynamic, and you just have to you know, it's an additional level of tactical decision making, which is the fun part of the game, is coming up with the tactical decision making process. And in so doing, you just kind of like, you're left with a situation where you get to look at it and make your decisions and figure out what works best for your army, when you want them, where you want them, and you just put them there, which makes a lot of sense. You know what I mean? These guys are coming in teleportation. You know, I get that it's never supposed to have been super exact, but you know, for a game, it's really frustrating when you can't control these things. You know what I mean? And you know, there's always an aspect of dice. There's always going to be that aspect in the game, but there are there's certain situations where that kind of you know, the fact that it's up in the air like that, the fact that it's not exact, that you have to kind of just put it on the board and you have to come to a consensus for 2 people who have very differing aims for that, or have desired outcomes from a situation, just makes the game a lot more it can make it very frustrating when we were playing the 7th edition. Even if I'm playing with friends, there's always those situations where you disagree over how things have scattered, you disagree over how things have worked out, and you know, there's no more of that. You know, you just place them down there. There's no more of that discussion, no more of that situation kind of getting in the way of you guys actually playing the game and having fun. So I also enjoy very much the idea that you can split fire models on an individual basis from a squad. It makes way more sense to me that that's kind of what you would do. You know, if my Terminator squad drops down and the guy with the assault cannon, he's probably going to want to shoot at the big nasty that you're going to be looking to get into combat with to try to soften them up. But at the same time, those guys with the Stormbolters, maybe they would just start taking out some of the smaller Gribblies that are around them to help soften up the position in general. You know, because when you drop in there, and you know, I know it's not everything's exact, but if you drop into a situation, you're going to want to shoot at the thing that you probably have the best effect on. You know what I mean? And those aren't necessarily going to be the same thing. And just because you have a heavy weapon shouldn't mean that you have less of a decision, less of a choice on what you shoot at. And I think being able to do that, so that, like I said, my Terminators I can use for this situation. I used my Stormbolters to shoot up at his Pathfinders to try to take out some of those marker lights, and I used my Assault Cannon to shoot at his Riptides because they could they were, you know, it's a stronger weapon. It has more of an effect on them, and I think that makes things it makes sense to me, and it was fun to be able to play with that and play with that kind of dynamic. Same thing with, you know, Predators. If you've got all these las cannons on them, you know, shooting multiple las cannons into one one rhino may seem a bit overkill. So maybe you shoot one of them off at something else, you know what I mean? Or if you're in a tactical squad and I've got a las cannon, I'm probably going to want to shoot at that rhino. I'm going to want to shoot at that tank that's coming at us. But my friends with the bolters are probably going to want to shoot at the guys that are running up next to it, because they're going to be able to take them out, and that makes it, you know, it helps protect us better, and it helps the situation better. It feels better. It feels more tactical. It makes it, it gives you a bit more flexibility in how your units operate, and it's fun. You know, you still have the situation where you have to declare everything in the beginning, so that if you decide that you really want to focus fire on something, the whole point is that they're just all focusing fire. Even if you don't get to roll those other weapons, the whole point was that you just dumped all of your weapons into them. So you still have situations where, you know, if you're like, I want this thing dead, so everything's going to fire into it, and the first weapon happens to get lucky and kills it off, the other weapons don't get to do anything, which is fine. That's just the dynamic of the game, and I think that's the way it should be. But I think that the ability to then make the decision where you go, well, you know, he's down to 2 hull points. I'm pretty sure that my las cannon can take it off, or 2 wounds. I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure my las cannon can handle the rest of that rhino. So my guys with the bolters are going to shoot at the squad that's running up alongside them, and it makes it fun. Overwatch, I like the idea. We got something wrong with the Tau when we were playing it. You know, because we didn't look. I guess we didn't read the whole. There was like the last line of that whole rule, and we missed an important fact of it, that it prevents it from shooting any more Overwatch that turn. But generally, having units be able to Overwatch at anything that comes at them, I like that. I think it helps take down a lot of the decision making, or like the situations where it's like, well, you know, I'm gonna charge you with this 10-man squad of Terminators, but I'm also going to charge you with this one TAC Marine who's left from this squad, and he's 3 inches away, so odds are he's going to make it in, and if you don't shoot at him, you're going to be locked in combat anyway. But if you kill him, then my 10-man Terminator squad is going to get to waltz in regardless. I never liked that. I would do tactics to work with that, but I never really enjoyed that. And seeing it seeing it take place, and seeing the fact that you can just take out that one guy as he's running at you, and then still be able to try to fend off the main unit that's charging at you. It was fun, and it was cool, and it was dynamic, and it made things interesting. You know what I mean? If you've managed to whiff on that one guy and he gets into combat, you're still locked in combat. You still can't fire off because you're busy with this guy that's all up in your grill, which I think makes sense. But if you're not engaged, I don't see why you shouldn't be able to just loose off some shots at the enemy that's charging at you. So seeing it in effect, I think it was very. I think it worked well. It also changes the way you do things. You know what I mean? I think it managed to. It changes your decision-making process on which units you charge in what order at what other units. And I think that was a good thing. I think it made for a fun, like I said, a fun tactical gameplay. Also, along the same line of charges, I'm really enjoying the fact that that vehicles can charge now. You know what I mean? It really takes advantage of their high toughness and their high wounds to absorb that Overwatch. And, you know, you could see that, where if these guys are getting out of a Rhino, why is the Rhino just going to sit back? Why wouldn't it just, like, run up into there and provide cover, basically, for this other squad running in? They're not very good in close combat. You know, most of them are hitting on 6s. Which is fine. That's the way it is, because they're just kind of like flapping their door, just kind of trying to run them down. Which is, you know, you're not very agile at that point. But they're high strength, so that if they do manage to get one of those hits on, it's going to hurt. Which is true. You know what I mean? It's hard to run. Hard to hit someone with a car in close proximity. But if you manage to run them over, that's going to hurt. And basically, they're there to just kind of like absorb some Overwatch, and then they can fall back if you want, or they could just sit there and kind of keep somebody locked in, which is you know, a pretty good strategy in and of itself. I really enjoyed that. I think it's going to become a big big part of the assaulting tactical decisions that go on. I think people are going to be taking transports, if for no other reason than to do exactly that. And I think that's going to be, I think it's going to be fun to see how that all kind of plays out in the game, you know, either competitively or just even just with friends. Just seeing how that all works is going to be pretty interesting. And actually seeing it in effect, there's a lot of people that were worried about that because of how the shooting was, that assault really wasn't going to be as effective a strategy as they were proclaiming it to be. I think because of things like the ability of vehicles to charge, because of the fact that you have the ability to charge out of deep strike, that you have the ability to charge out of a transport, all of these things actually make assault way more viable, way more doable. And there are units in there that are very good at close combat. I had a squad of Deathwing Knights that got in close combat with a Storm Surge, and in one round of combat, they managed to take off half of its wounds, which is pretty brutal. You know, and that's super effective if they get them in there. And a lot of armies that are, you know, assault specific are going to have those units that can do that kind of heavy damage in close combat. And now it's a lot easier to get them into close combat, even with the Overwatch rules being the way they are. There's ways around it, there's ways to work with it, and it's not as, you know, without the things like you had with, like with Dark Angels, if they took the Lion's Blade, they could shoot full ballistic skill Overwatch. It's basically just a second shooting shooting phase. You don't have that kind of thing anymore. I don't know. Maybe they'll bring it back when they get the codexes out. But you know, thinking on it on a general situation, I'm not sorry to see that go. I think it was pretty brutal and made things and it just made it into the shooting game that 7th edition was. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out now in 8th edition with that. But yeah, with everything having to hit on 6s, it really makes things pretty even. You know what I mean? And it's like Overwatch is Overwatch. It's always going to have that aspect of, well, I still get to shoot you even if you're charging at me. But it really does. It really is a lot easier to get into those close combats. What else? I like the fact that advance is now part of the movement phase. I hated the fact that you had to, you know, if you wanted to run people, you had to, you know, move them and then do all the movement, and then you had to come back to them in the shooting phase to roll the dice to run. Now advance is just, you know, you roll a d6, or some of them have flat out, like my bikes just add 6 inches to their move, and you just move them right then. You know, you're no longer having to go back. And yeah, it restricts a lot of things. Like you can't, unless you have a special rule, you can't advance and charge. You can't advance and shoot unless you have an assault weapon. So you know, it does all these things that Run did, but it keeps it. But now you just do it during the movement phase, which made sense to me, because it was, you know, the number of times that we're like, I'm just going to run them now anyway. That's the way you're supposed to do it. So there's no more of that, like, you know, asking for a house rule on that. That's just the way it is, and I think that speeds up the game. So you don't have like if you have a unit that, if you have an army that's going to do a lot of running or a lot of advancing as it is now, you don't have basically two movement phases. You just got the one that they get to move a bit further, which makes sense. And I think it really sets up the situation that, again, like I said, streamlines the game, gets them past the boring parts, into the parts that are fun, the reason that we play the game. You know, I don't think anyone really plays the game in order to sit there and measure out movements. I think people play the game because of the tactical decisions. They play them because of the you know, because of the fun of rolling dice and everything like that. And you know, movement has always been a important part of the game for me, as many of you who watch my battle reports know. I'm always talking about, you know, I'm not going to show the movement phase because it's boring to watch, because it is boring to watch and it's boring to do, but it's something that you have to do and make part of the tactical decisions. But now it just kind of speeds up that whole process. You're not sitting there waiting for entire turns to go by. before you can move again. You know, you just take it out of the way during the movement phase, and you're good to go. I think on top of that, you also have situations now that it can speed up a player turn. Like I said, if you have a time when you're just going to be doing a lot of maneuvering and you're trying to position yourself better for the rest of the game, and you just have a whole bunch of advances, you have a whole bunch of flat outs, you get to do it in just the movement phase, and you move on. You just keep going to the next person's turn, so you can keep it flowing, keep the game running, keep the game flowing, which is what's fun. You know, it really felt like they were quicker games. Which is not a bad thing, because if you want to make a whole day out of it, you can play multiple games now instead of having to play just one game for that whole day. If you've got 6 hours to play, instead of just doing one game in that 6 hours, you can now do two, 2 or 3, depending upon how quick and how much you know the rules. I think later on it's going to get more and more like that, more and more to the fact that you're going to be able to remember how things go, and it's going to go even a lot smoother once once the rules become second nature, like they did with 7th. So I think it's fun. I also really like the diversity of abilities for the way they've done. A lot of the weapons, a lot of the different powers and stuff have become very very fluffy. Like for instance, the apothecaries, the way they work is super cool. So now they're independent characters. So they're characters that go out there on their own. They're elite choices, or at least the Deathwing one I don't think I've checked on the Greenwing Apothecary, but my Deathwing Apothecary is an elite choice. And it says in its Narthesium that if it ends a movement phase within 3 inches of a friendly Dark Angels unit, if there's a wounded model in that unit, that model can now heal D3 wounds automatically. So it's super effective if you have them running up there with, but it has to be infantry or bike. So if they're running up with a whole bunch of characters, if they're running up with like Terminators, multi-wound models, things like that are either infantry or bikes, they're super effective for that, because they can keep those wounds coming back, and just keep them on the table, keep them in the battle. They also have an ability where if they end within 3 inches of a unit, and you choose that unit, if they have nobody who's injured, so everyone else needs to be at full wounds, and they've lost a model previously in battle, they can try to bring them back. On a 4+, a model comes back with 1 wound left onto the table. But if he fails that as the apothecary, he can't do anything else for the phase. So he can't charge, he can't shoot, can't do anything, because he's too busy collecting the gene seed of that model, which is fantastic. It's super fluffy, super narrative, super cool to think about that he runs up there and does all he can to bring him back into the battle, and if he can't, then he has to collect the gene seed, because you have to continue on the legacy of the chapter. So I think that's a fun, fluffy way. The characters are awesome. I think they're awesome. I think they've done a good job of the named characters, at least on the Dark Angels ones that I've seen. All of them seem to have gotten a boon to what they used to be able to do. I think you're going to see a lot more of them on the table. They give bonuses now in bubbles, which is cool, but they're on their own. So I had a situation where I happened to get a unit got mowed down that I didn't expect to get mowed down, and suddenly my Interrogator Chaplain is the closest model to this guy's shooting, so they got to just wail into him, because you can now, because he's out there on his own. But I think it's interesting. I think what they've done now with the special characters, like the named characters, I think is really beneficial. I think they've made them really cool. They made them very flavorful. I think a lot more of the flavor of the armies and the chapters and stuff is going to come in later once they come out with the codexes. But for now, they've done a really good job of making the characters at least flavorful, which is fun. I know with the Space Marines, they have access to a lot of the named characters specifically for each of the main chapters there, and that's really the big differentiating idea at this point, is just the special characters that you can take with that army. But I think a lot more differences. I think you're going to see chapter tactics. I think you'll probably see Legion-specific rules for the Chaos coming out once they come out with the codexes. And I know a lot of people were a little bit grumpy about that not being a part of here, but if you think about it, these indexes weren't meant to completely replace The army, they were meant to be a way for you to get in and start playing the game right away without having to sit back and wait 6 months till your codex comes out and not being able to play 8th edition, which would have been very frustrating if if they came out and you didn't happen to be part of the first wave of codices that were coming out. So this way they were able to just focus on the rules, not necessarily focus on the unit specific rules. They didn't have to necessarily focus on developing fluff, developing a lot of the extra flavor that I think will come with the codexes. They could just worry about making sure that they had all of the units and the models able to be played on the battlefield. And I think that's a brilliant idea, because now you get to go in, and also it gives you the opportunity now as a player for $25 or whatever it is. You can buy a codex, buy an index, and you have access to a whole bunch of different armies. You know what I mean? If you go in there and say you've had a guard army for a long time, you've got a big guard army, so you're going to go in, you're going to buy Imperial Index 2. That's the one with the Imperial Guard in there. But it also is going to have access to the Sisters of Battle. It's going to have access to the Assassins. It's going to have access to Tempest of Scions. It's going to have access to a lot of different units and organizations to kind of play with. You know what I mean? So now you can go out and just buy that. You don't have to buy a whole codex. You got $25. You've got all the access to all of those models. Same thing with Xenos. If you've got a Genestealer Cult army like I do, you're buying Xenos too. And now also I have the rules to Tau. Now I also have the rules to Orcs. Now I also have the rules to Tyranids. And I can check them out, see what they're like, and be like, oh, that's interesting. Let me give it a shot. You could borrow models. You could do, you could do counts as if you're just playing with friends, and give it a shot and see how you like it. For $25, you could buy. So what is that? It's $125. You can buy all of the rules for every model that's available in 40K. Could you imagine what that was like if you were trying to do that when they were just codexes? It would have been impossible. You know what I mean? You could have borrowed codexes, I guess, but this way you've got all the rules there, and you can give it a shot. You can see what goes there, and you're like, wow, that seems really interesting to me, and you can go out and try it. There's no reason that you can't try. You can't count your regular Space Marines as Chaos Space Marines if you want to, and see how their rules stack and see how their rules play. And if you like it, you can start doing a Chaos Army. Maybe that's what you buy. You buy that codex when it comes out, and you can start modeling and painting them if it hits your fancy. So I think the fact that they've combined a lot of the armies into the same indexes is fantastic, and I think it's going to be fun. And it's going to be interesting to be able to look and see other armies that you wouldn't necessarily have, because at this point I only own the codexes for the armies that I actually play. So I own the codex for the Dark Angels. I own the codex to the Dark Angels, Deathwing, Death Watch, I should say, the Genestealer Cult, and I had the Imperial Agents one because I liked the Assassins and stuff like that. Now you get to go out and you get to try. You can have them all, or if you don't want to, for $25, you've now got all the power armored Imperial forces out there. So you buy that one $25 book, and now you have the rules for all of the Space Marines, all of the specific chapters otherwise, so like the Space Wolves, the Blood Angels, the Dark Angels. You now have access to the Death Watch, you have access to the Grey Knights, and you have access to all of them now. So you can have it in there. So say you're interested in playing Space Marines, but you don't know what chapter you want to do. You buy that one book, $25, and now you've got access to all of their rules, and you can start to figure out what fits your fancy. You know what I mean? And as you try to figure out what kind of aesthetic that you're interested in when it comes to it, you can also get to check out the rules and see which rule system fits your fancy. So maybe you're looking at it and you're like, wow, I really like the concept of the Thunderwolf Cavalry being able to charge the way they do. I think that's going to be really interesting. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So now maybe that's what you focus on. You know what I mean? Or maybe you had always had a Xenos army and you were interested, you'd always kind of been interested in some power armor dudes because they look cool, they got fun guns. And now you can go out and buy that one index and you have access to all of them, and you can make the decision for yourself on what you do and how you play it. So yeah, so generally I think it's really going to open up things. I think it's going to make things a lot more fun, and I think it's kind of opened the door to a lot of different options for players and enthusiasts in general that I think is going to prove to be excellent for the hobby and for the game in general. Yeah, so far, like I said, it's been a very positive experience that I've had with 8th. The game is a lot of fun. The rules seem to flow. They make sense, and like I said, they're simplified to the point of not getting in the way, but they're complex enough to make it tactical and to make it fun. So they haven't taken out any of the decision making. They haven't taken out any of the tactics that makes the game fun. You know, they didn't just simplify it into rock paper scissors. They've turned it into they basically took out a lot of the things that made the game feel clunky, and left all of the things that made the game feel fun. You know what I mean? I don't know many people who are pining for the days of scatter and the fact that it would, you know, they loved those kind of arguments with your opponent as to which direction it's really going. I don't know anyone who really had a lot of fun trying to figure out what models fit underneath a template. I don't know many people who are pining for those things to return. Everyone that I've talked to that's played the game, everyone that I've played the game with, has said that they really enjoy it, and you can see it. You know, you can look at the battle reports that are out there. There are a few of them. They really kind of show that people are having fun with the game, which is, you know, that's the whole freaking point of what we do, is having fun with this game, and being able to play with our toys and be able to get out there and you know, enjoy the company of a friend for a couple hours. Points wise, it feels like there's a bit of a bloat in the points, so that it seems to me that like about 1 1/4 more points. So now what used to feel what an 1850 point list would usually be, now a 2,000 point feels like appropriate for what that was, the power level and the amount of you know, the power level and the number of models that you had on there. So I imagine you'll see 2,000 become the you know, the competitive tournament level number, because it just feels, it felt right. I've done a 2,000 point game and it felt about 1850 point level. So it really opened all of that up there. I think that a lot of the really powerful units did have bump ups in point cost, so it balanced them out a bit. I guess the one thing that's going to take a little bit getting used to is adding war gear to everything, you know, except for named characters. Everything but named characters now requires you to purchase the war gear. So certain things are free, like bolt pistols and bolt guns and things like that. A lot of the general war gear that you have on them is free, so it doesn't really add much. But like storm bolters are 2 points, so suddenly my Terminators, I need to add 2 points, and then you need to add the points for Power Fist. I can't remember off the top of my head what that was. So the Terminators that you get there, you have to you know, you look at their points, and then you have to add the points for their war gear, like the Power Fist, like the Storm Bolters, or the Power Sword on the Sergeant. Things like that you just need to add and keep in mind when you're building your list that you need to add with all of those guys. It's nice because it does allow you to, you don't have to worry about, they don't kind of have to worry about the trade-in price, like if you're trading in a bolt gun for a melty gun versus trading in you know, a storm bolter for a gun. It doesn't matter anymore because they cost a point, they cost a certain point level, and then you add them onto the model when you're purchasing them. So for instance, if I'm going to put a plasma cannon into a Devastator squad, it costs the same as if I'm giving the plasma cannon to a Terminator, and they don't have to worry about whether that that regular Marine giving up his bolt gun to get that plasma cannon is equal to the Terminator giving up his storm bolter for it. It's all part of it now, and you just take that points and you just add them onto the units. I think that makes things a bit more even, and I think that was the whole point, because they have those two systems. They've got the power levels, and then they've got the granular point match system. And the point was that if you're just playing a friendly game and you don't really care about like the granular nature of it, you just do the power levels and you just play them and put them on whatever weapons you want that look cool in your army or that you want to give a shot. You just get to do that. But you know, when you're doing a match play and you're doing a more competitive game like that, you want it to be as even and balanced as possible. So if you see a plasma cannon out there, you know what it costs. You know what it costs to add that onto that model. and you just make the decision from there. So it makes it a bit more even. It makes it easier to kind of find that balance. So if plasma cannons start doing really well, they don't have to go back and figure out. They can change the point level of plasma cannons without having to go back and figure out if the trade-in value for each of the different weapons was good or not. They just go, this is how much a plasma cannon costs now. There's an additional 3 points to put it on your guys. It's like, okay, cool. You just put that into your mathematics working. It's going to take a little bit to get used to. I think I've already seen a lot of people that have started to put together spreadsheets to keep all of the war gear options easier to figure out, which makes sense to me. But me, I just made it part of my usual pen and paper system of making lists. That's what I do, and it works. I mean, it works for me. May not work for you, but that's what I do, and it makes it easy enough. And I like the fact that I now don't have to worry about what these guys had at the beginning. I now have to put them on so that I know exactly what they've got, each of them. But like I said, it's going to take a little bit to get used to remember that and just go, oh, that's right, I forgot to add the points for this. So that's one thing. And I imagine it might be a little bit more difficult for TOs maybe going forward, trying to figure out if lists are legal or not, because now they have to worry about the point values for each of the different weapons on all of them. But I guess that was always something you had to keep in mind. It's just a little bit more, it's an additional step now that goes into the list making process if you're making a match play list. But it's not a game breaker to me, and it adds a little bit of complexity, and I'm sure going forward, the more and more lists that I make, the more and more I get used to doing it, the easier it's going to get to remember that. So I'll go in there. Like I said, I already remember now what storm bolters cost, because I've been adding a bunch of those onto rhinos, adding a bunch of those onto terminators and stuff like that. So I now know what a storm bolter costs, and I'm sure it's going to get to the point as I put more and more units with more and more weapons that I'll start remembering what each of those weapons costs. Like a force sword is 12 points. So there you go. Yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be fun to see how things develop like that. Some other rules that I think are interesting. I like the fact that they've gotten rid of null deploy. I know my old tournament list depended very much on null deploy, and it took full advantage of null deploy. But I don't think it. I don't think it's it doesn't. I think what it does is it just makes things a little bit more balanced for those kind of games, because I don't think a lot of my opponents really enjoyed looking at the game board and seeing none of my models on it to start off with, because there was nothing they could do. So if they had first turn, they couldn't shoot anything, they couldn't charge anything, they couldn't really maneuver against anything because they don't know where everything is. So they're just kind of sitting back there, and that's boring. That's not fun. But now, at least if half my models are in reserve, yeah, they might come in from turn 1 now. Don't have to worry about having a special formation to do that. But at the same time, there's going to be something on the board for them to kind of play off against, so they can shoot at, they can charge at, they can maneuver against, which I think makes things more fair. I think it makes it fair. I think it makes it more fun. And I just think it's gonna make the game more enjoyable in general. It's not game breaking. I know there's gonna be ways that people are just gonna spam a bunch of cheap single model characters if they want to keep a massive amount of their army in reserve. But at that point, then they've got a whole bunch of individual character models out there that you can pick off without having to worry about shooting through regular full units to get to them. So they're probably going to give up First Blood a lot easier at that point. So I just think it's going to make it a more enjoyable, streamlined game because of that. What else? Oh, I like the new deployments. I think they're fun. I've never been a fan of Vanguard, which is why it's still there, unfortunately. But they added in three more regular deployment choices. One takes a note out of the old kill team setup, where you've got corners, and then you've got a circle in the middle that's no man's land, 9-inch circle in the middle. That's in 9-inch radius circle in the middle. That's a no man's land between the two armies. It's a little complicated. It's not super complicated. It's really easy to it's easy to figure out, but it just adds another little layer when you're putting it out there. But I am a big fan of the ones with the, what are they called? I can't remember their names. Oh, I had it around here somewhere. But basically, yeah, what did I have here? Oh yeah, like the frontline assault or the spearhead assault, which are the ones that basically just have like an added arrow to them. So you've got one that's on the short ends, and it's like an arrow that kind of comes out that are 18 inches away from the tip, the points there. And then the long one, same thing, long edge instead of the short edges, and comes to a point that's 18 inches away. It makes it interesting. You know, you can put your assaulty armies right at the spearhead, the real point there, to try to get them in closer for assault. But at that same time, you're now going to be within a lot more gun range at that point. So it's just that trade-off, that tactical decision that you have to make. And deployment is chosen by the winner of the roll-off, which is fun. So they get to choose the deployment type. So if you really hate Vanguard, you don't have to play Vanguard anymore, which is brilliant, which is so much fun, because I hate Vanguard. It's just not my thing. It's not fun to do. So now you get to choose. So if you win off, you don't like Vanguard, you get to do it. Or if you win and you want to set up your long range weapons as far away from the enemy as possible, you can do hammer and anvil. That's still an option there, and hold them back in the far edge, shooting at them as they come at you. Or if you are an assaulty army, you know, you can choose the long edge triangle so that you've got as many units as close as possible to the enemy. Or you can just do Dawn of War, however you want to do it. And you get to choose, which is fun. I think that adds another aspect of tactical decision. So when you're making a list, you look at it and you go, well, what kind of deployment really plays to the strengths of my army, to my list? And you keep that in mind so that when it comes up for choosing, if you happen to win, you know what deployment you're going to use. It also lets you look at a table and see how see how the terrain is set up, and you can try to figure out what works to your benefit from being able to do that too. And then when you're deploying units, I really like this. It really adds another aspect of gamesmanship, which is fun. Another aspect of tactical decision making. When you're deploying units, you deploy them unit by unit. So if I'm sitting up here and I've got say I've got a predator that's really designed to take down his tanks or his big monstrous creatures. Now you have like this bit of a game where I'm deploying units until hoping that I can hold back my predator until he places the big primary target that I want him to focus on, so that I can counter deploy and make best use of it. So I don't have to sit there if I go deploy first and deploy everything and then see him completely counter deploy away from me and be left out in the dirt. I can now start to place unit by unit as they place unit by unit and play off of each other and figure out how each other is getting deployed. So if he places his marker light guys over there on the one side, maybe I hold the unit that I don't want him getting his marker lights against over on the other side. But now he places his second marker light unit on that side. So, you get to it's not just either I get to counter deploy against you. What it is that each unit you place, you have to decide which ones you place first, which ones you place second, and which ones you place third, trying to figure out what's more important to be able to counter deploy with. And it adds an aspect of gamesmanship. So you're sitting there and you're like, all right, well, I'm going to now deploy this librarian back here. That's a unit, it's deployed, Or I'm going to deploy, this apothecary back here. And you can see what's setting up for back there, and you're making your little assaulty squad there, but you haven't put down a lot of other things, so they have to eventually put down. And then whoever finishes placing their units first goes first. Or gets to choose if they go first or second. They get to make that choice. So instead of having a roll off for it, it's whoever finishes deployment first gets to choose. So if you have a lot of units, you're probably not going to get to choose if you go first or second. That's going to be up to the other person. Or if you hold things in reserve, they're not on the table, so you don't have as many units to deploy, and that becomes part of the decision-making process. And if you finish deploying first and you just choose to go first, then your opponent gets an option to seize at that point and try to take it. But yeah, it's fun and it's interesting, and adds an aspect of gamesmanship and tactical decision making to the game that wasn't there previously in 7th edition because it wasn't. So I guess this is something they've had in Age of Sigmar and fantasy in general, I think, where you have the counter deployment like that. The morale phase is not as brutal as I think a lot of people feared, but it can be brutal, but it's not necessarily as awful as I think a lot of people had feared. Because a lot of the units, you're just rolling the 1d6. If you lose one unit, if you lose one model, if you've got leadership 7 or higher, you can't lose anything, you know? If you have leadership 6, there was a couple, I think, Tau guys who had leadership 6. If they lost one unit, if they rolled a 6, they would have lost a guy, except they've got a special rule that means that if they roll a 6 on that, they automatically pass. So I don't think it's quite as just game-changing as it had once been feared, but it does leave you in a situation where if you get just swamped with a whole bunch of Ghiblies, that they could start to lose a lot more models if they start losing units in close combat or in anything like that. It allows you to no longer kind of be stuck down in the one. It helps to reduce the power of the quagmire that you can get with those big units, because you know, if you've got leadership 6 and you lose 5 guys, you're gonna be losing someone unless you roll a 1 or a 2, you know. So if you can manage to take out a lot of models, then you're going to start losing it. But those big expensive models that people were afraid, like, oh my god, my Terminators are going to start losing, that's a lot of points to lose in there. You know, at leadership 8, it's models lost, not wounds taken. Since they're 2 wounds each, you know, at leadership 8, they've got to lose 3 guys before they can start losing anyone from the morale test. And at that point, you're hurting anyway. And you would have to roll real bad anyway. So, yeah, I don't think it's quite as brutal as a lot of people thought it was going to be. But at the same time, I think it's going to be fun to see how it makes an effect. Because I've heard a lot of people be like, oh, this is the age of the cheap infantry units. But those cheap infantry units can really be hurt with morale because of the way that works. So, you know, it'll be a trade-off and will be interesting to see. And I think if you have those trade-offs, that's what makes for an interesting game. You know, if you have to make that decision where it's like, yeah, they've got low leadership, so I could lose them in the morale phase, but at the same time, I think that having that many guys that can just tar pit a big enemy unit is worth it. Yeah, so those are just my first initial impressions, my first impressions here of 8th edition. It was a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun with the games that I've played. It has me really excited for the rest of this edition, seeing what comes out with the codexes, see where they go forward with the storyline. The bits and pieces that I've been hearing about the storyline have been interesting. So I'm excited to kind of see what they do with that. And just generally, I'm very happy with the changes. Like I said, other than making list building a little bit more complicated at first, now that I've still got to learn all these things, other than that, I haven't found really any faults in what we've been playing. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think. Any of you have played a game or haven't played a game or watched some battle reports or just read the rules. Let me know what you think, see what your impressions are. I know I've had some conversations already with people with kind of thoughts that they've had about how the game was going to play based upon just reading the rules that were very different when I actually took the models onto the battlefield and actually played with them. It's a whole different game. And also, if you go into 8th edition expecting it to look like 7th edition, you're probably going to be disappointed. It's a whole different game. It really is a completely different game, but with all the models and lore and stuff that we love. So it's a lot of fun. It's really interesting, and yeah, it's dynamic. It's tactical. It's entertaining, and it's streamlined to the point of just the enjoyment parts, which is great. So, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. We'll carry on the conversation, and let me know if you're excited about the changes that you're seeing coming with 8th edition. If you've played a couple games, let me know what your experience has been. Let me know what some of your concerns are maybe about it, and we can just have a conversation about that and see what goes on. Let me know even some of the stuff that you're sad to see go from 7th edition. I know there's some people that are really sad to see certain things go. I'm honestly not super sad to see anything so far go. Anything that's been gone, I'm not really missing. I think it'll be interesting to see. A lot of people, you know, were worried about not having the rerollable Jinx save for for Ravenwing, but it just, they get, you know, now they can advance, they don't have to worry about snap shooting, and they get a 5+ invul save, which is nice. Basically turning them into Terminators at that point. So, yeah, so let me know what your thoughts are, let me know what your plans are, and I hope you're excited. I got the skin put on these guys. It's kind of cool. I guess I can kind of go over what I did. I got a leader here with a bone sword and whip. I went with a guy with the metamorph claw, I went with another guy with a metamorph claw. I had another guy with just the whip, and this guy here is going to have the rock saw when I finish him all up. So I thought that was pretty good for the first group here. Oh, and this is the icon guy. I kind of started painting a bit of him before, and he just kind of sat there half painted for a long time. So I figured I may as well just paint on his skin since he was over there. So yeah, let me know what you think about these guys. Let me know what you guys think your army's going to do and how you're going to play it, and just carry on the conversation. So I hope you guys have all enjoyed it. I have been Phil, the Glacial Geek, as always. And until next time, have fun.